Hello. I think I'm live here now, a- and hopefully it's working okay. I had a bit of trouble getting started, so I apologize for being a couple of minutes late. Um, so I just wanted to get started by giving you a little bit of information. Starting off first by just wanted to direct you to the Neighbors, Friends, and Families website for a lot of great resources and information. And there's some information about this talk as well, and about a link to our website, the website from the project that I'm working on. I know that there's a few people watching and some people will be watching later. If you do have comments or questions, you can enter them and I will try to answer if I can. And I'll also give you some information about how to reach us directly after if you're interested in speaking to us. So I just wanted to first start by introducing myself. My name is Mindy Noble. I'm a lawyer and I work at a legal clinic called the Human Rights Legal Support Center. The Legal Support Center is a legal clinic that serves the entire province of Ontario. And what we do at that, we assist people who've experienced discrimination or harassment in any of the areas covered by the Ontario Human Rights Code. So as I said, it's completely free. Anyone who calls us can get free confidential information and advice. Um, and we also have a designated team of Indigenous staff who provide services to anyone who identifies as Indigenous, contacts us, and would like culturally safe services. I'm also coming to you from a project called the SHARE Project. So the SHARE Project is a project that is run through the Human Rights Legal Support Center, but it's part of a nationwide group of organizations that received funding from the federal government to do some work around workplace sexual harassment, around giving people advice and information. So the goal of the SHARE project, which SHARE stands for Sexual Harassment and Assault Resource Exchange. The goal of our project is to educate people about different kinds of legal and some non-legal options for people who've experienced sexual harassment and or sexual assault in the workplace. Our big goal really is to empower people. So that doesn't mean necessarily if you contact us that you have to start some kind of legal claim. Our goal is really to empower people with knowledge and information. So help people recognize sexual harassment, know what your options are, and then, if you decide that you want to pursue those options, to assist you by giving you some information and advice and assisting with other referrals as well if they're needed. There's two parts of our SHARE project. Two very important parts that work together. So one part is outreach, where we go out into the community, into different organizations, schools, high schools, universities, colleges, and to provide advice, and not advice, but information about sexual harassment in the workplace, about different legal options, how to recognize sexual harassment, how to stand up to sexual harassment, how to report sexual harassment. So those are all parts of our outreach. Of course, because of COVID, it's all virtual right now. And it's a big important part of our project because it's really about helping people understand workplace sexual harassment and what the options are. And then we also have an important part of our project where people can call us and get direct advice about their situation that they're experiencing. So in our outreach, we're just giving information. In our legal advice component of it, we're giving specific advice on issues. So people can call us if you think you may have experienced sexual harassment, you're not sure, or you are sure and you want to know what are your options. Is there anything that you can do to deal with it? And so what I wanted to talk about today is a couple of different things. First of all, about what is sexual harassment, how to recognize sexual harassment in the workplace, and also some of the power dynamics that exist in workplaces and some of the barriers that can prevent people from reporting when they've experienced workplace sexual harassment. So some of the barriers, let's start with what is sexual harassment. So first of all, when we're talking about the workplace, I want it to be clear that the definition of a workplace is pretty broad. So when we're talking about the workplace, we're not just talking about someone going to paid employment. We're also talking about students who are doing co-ops, or anyone who is volunteering or working as an intern or doing some kind of internship. Anyone who is involved in that kind of a broad definition of what is a workplace. Anyone who is in any of those situations would be covered by some of the laws that help people protect people from sexual harassment. So even if you're in school and you're just doing a co-op placement, there are laws that can protect you when you go into a workplace. And we want people to know what those laws are and to understand how it works. So I'm going to start first by talking a little bit about what is sexual harassment, and then we'll talk a bit more about power dynamics and the barriers that are reporting which are connected to those power dynamics. So first of all, what is sexual harassment? So the legal definition basically defines sexual harassment as a course of conduct. So often the way that's described or identified is usually a course of conduct is more than one incident, although it can be one incident in certain cases. And if it's serious, it would be considered harassment, even if it's only one incident. And it could be comments or conduct that are related to sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, where the comment or course of conduct is known or reasonably known to be unwelcome. So, somebody in the workplace, even if you don't specifically say, I don't want you to harass me, or I don't want you to make that comment, it could still be considered harassment. It doesn't mean you're consenting to the harassment if you don't specifically say, I don't want it, because in a workplace generally, really in the workplace generally, people should know that sexual harassment and sexual comments are generally not welcome in a workplace situation. So one of the, in terms of the different examples, I'll give you some different examples of workplace sexual harassment that has happened and that can happen. And these examples are not every single case of sexual harassment. There could be something that happens that I'm not mentioning that would be potentially potentially considered sexual harassment. So some examples are for, some physical situations of sexual harassment. Could be something like inappropriate touching. It could be standing in someone's personal space to physically or sexually intimidate them, physically blocking someone's way. So an example of that would be, I've had a few cases or a few clients that I've spoken to who work in as servers or in other roles in a restaurant or a bar. And some of them have said to me, I was in the kitchen getting food, or I was getting cutlery. And when I tried to get out of the cutlery area or the food area, this person stood in my way and blocked me, and I had to brush by them in order to get out. So that would be considered something that would be, could be considered sexual harassment. It's those kinds of situations. In another example, verbal could be such things like verbal comments, sexual jokes, making fun of someone's sexual orientation or their gender identity. Where gender identity is a factor, it could be something like, asking specific personal questions about whether somebody has had a specific surgery or things like that. Talking about other people's sex lives. Those are all comments and that could be considered sexual harassment in the workplace. Some other visual examples could be, somebody leering or staring, sharing sexual images without consent, or sexual text messages without consent. And it's important to note that when sexual harassment happens in the workplace, it doesn't necessarily have to happen in a physical workplace. A lot of workplaces are virtual right now because of COVID, and even in workplaces that are normally physical workplaces, there can be interaction between staff or managers and staff. Or through staff and customers through social media or online or in other forms as well. So if something happens to you, if you get a comment online or through a picture through Snapchat, those things could still be considered workplace sexual harassment, even if they're happening virtually instead of physically in person. And then the other thing, it's important to note that these acts of sexual harassment could come from a coworker who's at the same level as you. They could come from a coworker who's, in a level below you in the workplace. Could come from a manager, a supervisor, or owner, or, in kinds of jobs where you are serving the public, it could come from a customer. So, if you work in a coffee shop and somebody comes in and is harassing you, that's also considered workplace sexual harassment, even if it's not happening even if it's not coming from someone you work with. Other forms of harassment could be things like asking for sexual favors in the workplace or reprisals for refusing romantic advances. So an example of that would be, someone goes into work and they're asked out on a date by a coworker or a manager. They say no, and all of a sudden negative things are happening at work. They're not getting the shifts they used to get, or worst case they get terminated, or there's comments and other harassment happening after that refusal. So those are all different kinds of examples to help you identify what might be a situation of workplace sexual harassment. And as I said, those are not the only examples. There are other things that could happen that could be considered sexual harassment. And if you're in a situation where you feel like something is happening and you're not sure if it's sexual harassment, you're definitely welcome. You're definitely welcome to call us and ask those questions, and we can help you figure out if what you're experiencing is sexual harassment, or if it's not sexual harassment, maybe there's some other issue that we can help you with, or a place we can refer you to that would help you deal with what you're experiencing. So that's the kind of quick information about how to identify workplace sexual harassment. I wanted to talk a little bit about power dynamics in the workplace. So there may be factors in a workplace that are beyond the control of the workers that can create power imbalances. And the different factors can affect people differently in the workplace. An employee may not feel comfortable saying no or taking steps to report sexual harassment because of these different kinds of power dynamics. So an example could be somebody who's new to Canada, and they're in the workplace, and they don't have permanent resident status yet, or they're not a citizen yet, and they're worried about what will happen if they say no. Will they be able to start a legal claim? Will it affect their immigration status? So that's a power dynamic in the workplace that can affect people significantly. Or people have power dynamics related to their financial situation, right? Like if you are in a workplace, if you're working and you desperately need the money to pay your rent or to provide food and clothing to your family, and you're worried about what will happen. Will you lose your job? Will you lose shifts if you speak up? So that can be a power dynamic that can affect someone in the workplace. There are also a lot of power dynamics that could also be related to other personal characteristics like race, gender identity, gender disability, sexual orientation. All of those different personal characteristics can impact how people work with each other in the workplace and how people respond. And those power dynamics and systemic racism and systemic issues that exist in the greater society also are at play in the workplace and can prevent people from stepping up and coming forward when they've experienced sexual harassment. It can also put people in situations where they're afraid to say no, or where they feel like they have to go along with what's happening in the workplace because they don't have any other option. And those kinds of power dynamics can also, those are factors that can affect and create barriers to reporting workplace sexual harassment. So, those power dynamics that I just talked about, and those personal characteristics that can impact on how people are able to participate in the workplace and whether people are able to step forward in the workplace. Those are some barriers. Other barriers that we know that exist that we've talked about, and that we've talked about with clients and people that we've spoken to are, first of all, the difficulty recognizing harassment in the workplace. So that's kind of a big one that prevents a lot of people from coming forward. There can be there can be a workplace culture that can also create different power dynamics, but can also create barriers to reporting. So there are workplaces where people are constantly making sexual jokes and having those kinds of interactions with each other, and people are afraid they feel like they have to participate in those jokes in order to become part of the workplace, to become, to make friends, to be accepted in the workplace. And so that can be a barrier to reporting if a person feels like this is just the workplace culture, everyone is making these jokes. And then I feel like I have to participate. And then, of course, that feeling of needing to participate can lead people to believe that, well, now I've kind of participated, so now how can I complain? Where in actuality, and the way that the human rights process and other processes look at these situations, there is an acknowledgement and recognition that sometimes people do feel compelled to participate in those kinds of things. And other aspects of workplace culture can be around hierarchies in the workplace, and lack of clarity around what the rules are and how to report and who to report to. So, even if a person knows that they've experienced sexual harassment and they want to report, you may not know what the next step is or how to report. Who do I speak to? Especially if if you're in a workplace situation where the person that is harassing you is the owner or a very senior person in the organization, and you feel like, if I report, who am I going to even report to, because this is the person that owns the company. So that can definitely be a barrier to reporting. And, if you're in that kind of circumstance and you're not sure what to do, you can give us a call, or, check our website. We have some information on our website, but you can definitely give us a call and we can talk you through what some of your options are. Other kind of barriers are embarrassment and shame. There's a lot of shame around sexual harassment. A lot of fear around, if I speak up, will I be believed? This person that's harassing me is he's friends with, or she or they are friends with the other people in the workplace. No one's going to believe me if I say that that person is harassing me. Um, and it is important to note that harassment is not just about, it can come from any gender, it can come from anyone in the workplace. It's not just specific to, what you hear the most probably is men harassing women, but it does happen across all genders and across all different kinds of situations. So that's definitely a barrier, is that fear that you won't be believed, or embarrassment or shame around what happened. There's also definitely like that concern around, oh, I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to cause problems. I need this job to pay my rent. I'm worried that if I report, then this person will punish me by reducing my hours or terminating me. So that's definitely a barrier that has come up that people are concerned about. There are protections in the law. If you do experience punishment for coming forward, there are laws that can help you, that can, that would deal with that, and that you can allow you to get some compensation for the harm, and also for the punishment as well if you experience that. And then, it can also happen in situations where people are students who are doing co-op placements, or if you're volunteering somewhere and you need those volunteer hours to graduate, or you need your co-op placement to graduate, or you need the specific training in the workforce to graduate. That can also be a definite barrier because of the fear that if you don't finish this placement, or if you don't get these volunteer hours, how is that going to impact your education and create a problem going forward? So, if you're in those circumstances, I would definitely encourage you to, approach your school or program you're in and discuss this, because, no school or program would want you to continue working in a place where you're being sexually harassed. And there are supports out there for you within your school, but also, from our services, and there are other services that we can point you to as well. And again, immigration status, as I mentioned before, that can also be a significant barrier to reporting. And sometimes people who are harassing will use that. Some person's immigration status against them and say, oh, I'm going to report you, or threaten that, oh, you can't do anything because if you come forward, then it will impact on you won't be able to become a Canadian citizen. So that can be problematic as well. And again, like there are free supports out there people who can help you and answer your questions and provide you with information that you need. So that's the information that I wanted to share today on the, what is sexual harassment, how to figure out if you're experiencing sexual harassment in the workplace, power dynamics, and some of the barriers to reporting. As I said, our services are free and confidential. Anyone can call us, if you're experiencing sexual harassment in other places as well, like in housing or in other forms of other places, you can call us as well. And through the work that we're doing through the Human Rights Legal Support Center, we can assist you. And if you're Indigenous and you're looking for assistance and you want to be served by somebody who's Indigenous, you can contact us and request services from our Indigenous team. So I think that's all I wanted to talk about today. I'm not sure I don't think I see any questions. I'm sort of new to Facebook Live, so I apologize if there are any questions that I haven't been able to get to, but we are definitely happy to answer any questions from people who are watching, or if you have questions specifically about a situation that you're experiencing or general questions, you can give us a call. And as I said, through the SHARE project, we're doing a lot of work. Through SHARE, through outreach, and we're happy to, do presentations or, talk further about how we can support you and provide services so that you can live in work in a safe environment, because everyone has a right to work in a safe environment, and nobody has to work in a place where they're experiencing discrimination or harassment. You have a right to be in a safe place. So that's all for today. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to the neighbors, friends, and families for inviting us to participate in these talks. And maybe we'll be back another time to talk about something else. Thank you very much. Bye.